Welcome to this episode of our program Arab Affairs. As usual, we will be discussing Arab files. Today we'll be speaking about the UN General Assembly's 76th session this week, whole week, which is usually a platform for leaders, high-ranking delegations and high-ranking officials to come together in order to put the challenges and the threats and all the files before hand in order to be able to discuss them, come out with solutions, come out with a vision to the situation. We'll be speaking about the Arab file and how it was tackled during the UN General Assembly's meetings. We'll be speaking through the statements of President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi's speech before the UN General Assembly meeting when he spoke about Egypt's vision regarding some regional issues and some of the threats and challenges. We'll also be speaking through the meetings that took place between Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry, who attended those meetings in New York, where he met with a number of his Arab counterparts, the Iraqi, the Jordanian, plus, of course, the president of the Libyan Presidential Council, as well as a number of other Arab officials. We'll be speaking about that in our episode. Before we start with our discussion, first let's have a quick look on the Arab news that took place during this week, and we'll come back for more discussion.
President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi met on Monday with visiting Yemeni Minister of Defense General Mohammed Ali al-Maqdashi. The presidential spokesman said that the meeting was attended by Minister of Defense General Mohammed Zaki. During the meeting, al-Maqdashi hailed the Egyptian-Yemeni relations in the fields of security and military cooperation. The Yemeni Defense Minister conveyed to President al-Sisi greetings of Yemeni President Abdrabbu Mansour Hadi. Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry asserted that Egypt would not spare no efforts to coordinate with brotherly and friendly countries to achieve Lebanese people's interests and restore stability in Lebanon. Shoukry stressed Egypt's readiness to support Lebanon in various domains, which will help in pushing forward its economy and reaching solutions for the issue of energy. The minister's remarks came during a phone talks with Lebanon's Prime Minister Najib Mikati. During the phone call, the top diplomat congratulated the Lebanese premier for forming a new government, wishing him success in dealing with current challenges facing his country. The foreign ministry said in a statement that Egypt condemned the failed attempt coup which Sudan witnessed and stressed its support to Sudan's transitional government and to its efforts to achieve Sudanese people's aspirations. The failed attempted coup was involving military officers and civilians linked to ousted regime of Omar Hassan al-Bashir. Earlier, Sudan Prime Minister said the coup attempt was the latest manifestation of deep divisions in Sudan during its move to democracy. Libya's parliament on Tuesday passed a no-confidence vote in the country's unity government and a new blow to UN-backed peace efforts and plans for December elections. 89 of the 113 lawmakers who attended the lower house session in the eastern city of Tobruk voted to withdraw confidence from the Tripoli-based administration of interim Prime Minister Abdel Hamid Dibeiba, but an upper house based in the capital rejected the vote, saying it violated established procedures, laying bare once more the extent of enduring divisions between the country's east and west. The escalation came amid growing tensions between the House of Representatives and Dibeiba's government, which took office earlier this year with a mandate to guide the country to elections on December 24th.
Right, welcome back. And as we said at the very beginning, we'll be speaking about how the Arab causes were tackled during the UN General Assembly's meeting, where President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi has made a long speech before, or many speeches before the UN General Assembly on different issues and how they reflect regionally or on the region and on the African continent. The President definitely has addressed several issues, including the vaccination and the distribution of the vaccination in Africa and the Arab world. He also spoke about localizing the vaccination. And he addressed a number of issues that have direct impact on the Arab world, including many of the challenges, terrorism, armed conflicts, and others. I guess we have with us over the phone to highlight the issue, Dr. Sherif Amir, Professor of International Relations. Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon.
Hello?
Yes.
Hello?
Yes, I hear you.
Yes, and I can hear you now.
Okay.
So, Dr. Sherif, good afternoon to you. And let me ask you, I guess we all followed the UN General Assembly's meetings that took place during the past week. And we have been following up with President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi's different speeches. Here, I have to speak, or we have to tackle how we read President Sisi's speech before the UN General Assembly, or the main UN General Assembly's meeting, and how he addressed the regional causes.
First of all, good afternoon. I think that President Sisi was very clear in his speech, and that the conflicts in the Middle East has to have a just and quick solutions for many problems, because we all know that the Western world, which is hurt by terrorism and immigration, all these problems is caused by the lack of concrete solutions in the Middle East. And one of these solutions has to be focused on the Israeli-Arab conflict, also the crisis in Syria, Iraq, and Libya. And I think that President Sisi is giving the alarm to the world that there is hope for peace. There is also strong countries who can maintain peace, like Egypt, and stability, and willing to work for the development of this region. But the international community has to be serious about their efforts. We have to find a solution for Libya. We have to work with the Libyan people and the Libyan National Army and the new government there. Egypt is willing to do everything that it takes to bring stability to this war-torn country. Same thing for Syria. And also in Iraq, Egypt has shown that it has strong commitments towards the people of Iraq, although there is some danger environment there. But still, Egypt is willing to be a partner in all these crises, and above all, the Israeli-Arab conflict. We have endorsed the peace between the Gulf states and Israel, and Sudan, and Morocco, and Bahrain, also all the Gulf states, I mean. And we are still working with the two parts, the Israeli government, the new Israeli government, under the premiership of Mr. Naftali Bennett, and also the Palestinian Authority of President Mahmoud Abbas Abu Mazen. And we work with everyone. Even when there is a conflict between Israel and the Hamas, General Abbas Kamel, the head of the intelligence, works 24 hours a day to find a solution. So President Sisi is giving the message that if you want to find solutions for immigration, for terrorism, also for climate change, because we are talking about that these days, you have to find the good environment and the good and just solutions for these conflicts as quickly as possible.
Dr. Sherif, here I have to say that as we all followed and as described by world media, President Sisi has rang the bell over every aspect that can really have a real impact on the stability and security of the region and the continent. Hence, he has pinpointed his finger on the big issues. When he spoke about terrorism, when he spoke about armed conflicts, when he spoke about issues of great concerns, the economic situation inside the developing world, when he spoke about foreign intervention, when he spoke about the even he addressed some of the impacts of some global issues like the climate change issue and the sustainable development issue and their direct impact on the developing countries. How far did he address every file and Egypt's vision regarding each file?
Well, President Sisi was the best person to talk about this issue because Egypt went through all these crises in the last decade. And he knows how the West, and I mean by that the European Union especially and the United States, let's skip the Trump administration because it was realistic about some problems in the Middle East, but the Obama administration and the Biden administration, both at a certain time there was this. I mean, the Democratic Party there. They had this vision about the Middle East, which was very confused, and I mean by that, confusing between the terrorist groups and the human rights. And they thought by endorsing some groups, they are endorsing the human rights. And President Sisi went through all these negotiations, all these years, the 8 years, the last past 8 years, to explain to the West that if you want prosperity and democracy in the Middle East, you have to find the solution in fighting terrorism and not endorsing some terrorist groups as a way of democracy. And I think that the West now understood many of these points that Egypt wanted to show the world, that democracy, it means development in the economy. So you have to have these countries. You have to invest in these countries so the young people will work and will find a good life inside their countries. When you find this solution, when you bring investment to the developing world, there will be no more immigration. It won't be 0%, of course, but there will be less. There will be no more terrorism because the young people will have the choice between prosperity or radicalism. So they will choose, of course, having economic prosperity.
Yes, Dr. Sherif, before we move to economic prosperity, but here I have to say that you mentioned terrorism, and terrorism has a great impact on the region. Here I have to say that the president has, as they say, he threw the ball in the international community's court when he urged or called on the international community to assume the responsibility regarding the developing countries and regarding the the world. Here, when he addressed terrorism, I here have to speak about a very important issue, which is defining terrorism, because the problem or the core problem of the issue is not terrorism, it's just defining terrorism. Who are the terrorists? What is should be considered as terrorism act? How do you view this matter? How is the UN dealing with this very particular aspect?
Well, let's be frank. The UN dealt with this problem very slowly. And the proof what we have seen in, for example, in Africa, when Boko Haram started striking West Africa, and then Al-Qaeda started to strike Mali, and then Al-Shabaab in Somalia. So they didn't act quickly. They were present in Africa as the UN task force, but they didn't do anything about it. I think that because the countries were contributing, the main countries contributing in the UN, I mean by that the superpowers had all these rival thoughts about handling the issue of terrorism. They defined terrorism, as you said, differently than we have in mind. For example, they thought that if we impose some security laws, exactly as they are doing in Europe and in France and in the United States, that we are crushing human rights, and that's not true. We are protecting our sovereignty and our national interests, and also the people, the civilians. So they confused, and this was the handicap for combating terrorism, that once we, the countries, the main countries in the Middle East, started to fight terrorism, they started criticizing what they have defined as human rights. No, we have the same definition as the West, that there is a security issue. It's not a human rights issue, it's a security issue. Civilians are killed, cities are being threatened. Even the tourists who come, they are threatened. Mm-hmm. So I think that the Western world now understood lately, unfortunately, that terrorism has the same definition everywhere, and that we have to fight it. Al-Qaeda or Daesh in Egypt is the same Al-Qaeda and Daesh in Europe or in the United States. They have to be same laws, same restrictions. So I think that Egypt showed a lot of strength, and also President Sisi discussed this from the first day he was in office, discussed this with his counterparts by telling them, you have the right to defend your own countries, and we have to defend our own countries. And if you look at the whole situation, you will find that your enemy is our enemy. It's not a crisis of security for your part and a human rights for our part. No, it's a crisis of security for everyone. And I think, and I'm sure, that all the Western leaders, including the Biden administration now, understands very well the vision of President Sisi.
Actually, here, Dr. Amir, I have to say that the president has spoken about an all-out, or rather an integral vision for tackling terrorism that is not just through military or security actions, but also through education, through ideology, through, as I said, defining terrorism, who are responsible for committing terrorist acts, who are funding them, who are harboring them. And I mean here, the president has put an all-out, or has called for putting a whole-out vision for tackling terrorism. From your point of view, how far do we need such a vision in order to be able to really eradicate terrorism as we need?
Well, we have two stages, two main stages. The first one is targeting these groups and those who are financing them. And I mean by that, when there is some terrorist elements who flee the country, any country, from the courts and all the sanctions of law, there is no explanation that other countries harbor them in the name of human rights. No, it's this person has committed crimes of terrorism in some particular country, and he has to be brought to justice. So we have to be aware that there are some groups, some people, they are all terrorists in the eyes of all the international community. This is the first point. The second point is, and what President Sisi used to say also, is the countries are the countries who are financing and harboring terrorist groups. And we think that, for example, the EU has been the subject of a huge blackmail from the regime in Turkey, for example, about the refugees and about the terrorism. And we have seen the intervention, what President Sisi spoke about, the foreign intervention in Libya, for example. So I think that the international community should hold accountable all these regimes for all the terrorism that is going on. So
I wonder,
these
Dr.
2 points are
Yes.
very important.
I wonder, Dr. Sherif, if they consider the foreign intervention in countries in a way that create havoc, that instigate instability, that destabilize situations and weaken the country's institutions, is considered a way of terrorism?
Of course, we have seen what took place in Libya with the NATO intervention. It wasn't calculated what will be after Gaddafi. No one in the West calculated what will happen next. As the same thing, the post-era of Saddam Hussein in Iraq. No one calculated what will happen next. But same thing in Syria.
In Syria, in Iraq, and the interference directly or indirectly in Libya.
Yes.
And the interference of some of the foreign countries directly, as I say, and indirectly sometimes. I mean, how far does this really instigate a kind of chaotic situation in those countries, not enabling their strong institutions from maintaining the stability and security of their own countries?
Well, I will give you an example, a concrete example. In Libya, there is a negative interference that we have warned a lot about. For example, the embargo, which is the armed embargo imposed on the national Libyan army. How this army will fight terrorism if there is an embargo against its arms. We have said it before that the regime of Gaddafi is not there anymore. Let the embargo be lifted and let the people of Libya be capable of defending their country against terrorism. So this is kind of interference that they are banning a country of the legitimate defense against terrorism. So I think that these points should be very clear for the West, because what goes around turns around. Afterwards, there will be, these armies won't be capable of defending the country, then there will be terrorism, then organized crime, and then there will be the refugees, and then our European partners come and complain from the infiltration of terrorists. So they have created the problem from the beginning.
Yes, indeed.
So the problem has to be solved from the beginning. First of all, the direct intervention shouldn't be in a way of uncalculated like it happened in Libya. The second point is that they have to find a solution for the non-direct intervention, which is handicapping the economy and the arms for these armies.
The existence of foreign troops on lands is a direct intervention, by the way.
Yes, of course. We have seen in Iraq, there was the U.S. bases there. It didn't stop terrorism. It has increased the terrorist groups at a certain time. And the same thing in Syria.
Yes.
There is presence of Turkish, American forces there, and
The
Damascus.
Turkish troops, for instance, on Iraqi soils in Syria. Anyway, Dr. Sherif Amir, I guess we thank you so much for being with us over the phone and for highlighting very important points here. Now we move on with our discussion. Before we move on, let's take this report in President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi's key speech to the UN General Assembly. Let's watch.